Where's my daughter and how did you get my vehicle?
We actually feel like she's in danger at this moment, like she's not safe.
3:50 a.m. A phone screen cuts through the dark of a quiet Houston apartment. One message, 4 words. I'm leaving. I'm not coming back. It came from Ashanti Allen's phone. It landed in her mother's inbox. But Ashanti didn't send it. She couldn't have. Because 4 minutes earlier, at 3:46 a.m., the father of her unborn child was already on a FaceTime call. The camera pointed at something no one should ever have to witness. He wasn't calling for help. He was confessing. And according to police, he turned the lens so another woman could see exactly what he'd done. This is Crime Autopsy. And this is the case of Ashanti Allen, 23 years old, 8 months pregnant, weeks away from holding her son, and the system that handed her killer a get-out-of-jail-free card 2 months before he allegedly took her life. Before we start the clock, hit subscribe. This channel exists to carve names like Ashanti's into the record, long after the headlines fade. And when you've heard the whole story, drop a comment, tell me the exact moment you spotted the first warning sign. I promise you, it came earlier than you think. To understand the horror of how this ends, you have to meet the woman Ashanti Allen was before the world learned her name. Friends paint a picture of someone soft-spoken, steady, the kind of soul who didn't stir drama. She worked her shifts, kept her circle tight, and by spring 2026, her entire world was narrowing to a single countdown, the weeks left until she'd become a mother. She and her boyfriend, Kevin Foe, had already named their son, Jackson. The name was chosen, the future was drawn. The baby shower plans were real. Her mother, Trissa Gaines Colbert, had driven her to a routine prenatal appointment just 2 days before the nightmare began. Ashanti's pregnancy was high risk, so these check-ins were the rhythm of her life. Vitals looked fine, nothing blared emergency. Trissa dropped her off, made plans to talk later, and never imagined it would be the last normal moment she'd have with her daughter. Her father, Edward Allen, would later distill Ashanti's plans to something heartbreakingly ordinary. She needed to buy a car seat, a stroller. The errands of a first-time mum whose due date sat circled on the calendar like a finish line she was racing toward. But beneath that quiet surface, something the family didn't know was coiling tighter. The man Ashanti was building this life with wasn't just a boyfriend with a temper. He was a documented predator. A 2019 charge for aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. A 2021 misdemeanor assault involving another woman. And then, right there on the timeline in bold, September 2025. 2 separate assault charges against Ashanti while she was pregnant. Let that sink in. The system knew. The paperwork existed. In February 2026, he was sentenced to 280 days behind bars. On paper, he should have been locked up until July, but he wasn't. We'll get to exactly how the math that freed him was done, because it may be the most damning calculation in this entire file. But first, let's walk into the early morning hours of April 10th, 2026, and watch a woman vanish. Set the scene. It's the dead of night, around 2:25 a.m. A surveillance camera at Ashanti's apartment complex captures a grainy but unmistakable clip. Ashanti steps out of her unit with Kevin Foe. She's alive, she's moving. She's 8 months pregnant, her body heavy with a son who will never take a breath outside her womb. They climb into her car together. The door closes, the camera cuts to static. That footage is the last confirmed image of Ashanti Allen walking on her own 2 feet. Now the timeline tightens. According to court documents, roughly an hour later, at 3:46 a.m., Foe dials a FaceTime call to a woman he'd been talking to online. Not a friend, not family, a digital connection. And what he tells her in that call freezes the blood. He tells her he killed someone, but he doesn't stop there. Investigators say Foe flipped the camera. He showed her what she later described as a body. A body. And then, in a detail so grotesque it makes the stomach turn, he told her he had to put the phone down, because he was trying to drag that body. Think about the mindset it takes to do that, to call a near stranger, confess to murder, and turn your camera into a snuff film. That's not panic. That's a display of control. That's a man showing off his handiwork. 4 minutes later, at 3:50 a.m., a text shoots from Ashanti's phone to her mother. I'm leaving. I'm not coming back. Read those words again. To an outsider, it might sound like a 23-year-old declaring her independence, maybe leaving a toxic relationship. But Teresa Colbert read it, and her instincts screamed. This wasn't her daughter's voice. This wasn't her daughter's plan. Ashanti's belongings were still in the apartment. Baby items, the tiny clothes, the half-built nursery, were untouched. A woman days from giving birth doesn't abandon a fully assembled crib. She doesn't leave without her phone charger, her wallet, her future. Trissa knew in her bones this message was a lie typed by someone else's fingers, and she was devastatingly right. April 10th, Trissa files a missing persons report, and then a specialized force enters the story. Texas EquuSearch, the volunteer group that has scoured bayous and fields for hundreds of the vanished, mobilizes for Ashanti, 8 months pregnant, high risk, every second draining hope from the clock. What follows over the next 6 days is a slow-motion tightening of a net that the killer never saw coming. Ashanti's brother, Xavier, goes into investigator mode. He tracks her phone's location to a house connected to Foe's mother. While he's standing right there, yards from where evidence might be buried, Foe's mother calls her son. She puts him on speakerphone. And Kevin Foe, calm and collected, denies everything. He hasn't seen Ashanti. He hasn't been in contact with her. Nothing. But the surveillance cameras tell a different story. Doorbell footage from that same address shows Foe arriving and leaving multiple times on April 10th. At one point, he returns carrying a backpack and a large container. The kind of container that makes your mind go to the darkest possible place. Investigators later line up Ashanti's phone location data with that footage, and the dots connect with sickening precision. Every stop he made, her phone made too, until it didn't. Then there's footage from a nearby business. Grainy, but clear enough. A figure in clothing matching what Foe was wearing, dragging what appears to be a body. Dragging. Toward the location where Ashanti would ultimately be found. Her car is discovered near his mother's home. On April 15th, a city employee finds Ashanti's phone at Edgewood Park, a short distance from where Foe lived. That phone becomes the final breadcrumb. Its location history points searchers to a bayou area in southwest Houston. April 16th, 6 days. A team combs Chimney Rock Park, and they find her, Ashanti Allen's body. Court documents would later reveal a cord wrapped around her neck. Not a weapon of impulse, a tool of deliberate, suffocating murder. Her father got the news and said his body went numb. He didn't scream. He just left himself for a moment, because no parent should have to process the fact that their daughter was killed, and the man who did it had been allowed to walk around free. Her sister Marche and brother Xavier spoke to cameras with the kind of raw, shaking grief that doesn't need editing. They talked about wishing Ashanti had felt safe enough to tell them. They promised to keep her name alive, to scream it until something changes. But here's the gut punch. 6 days after Ashanti disappeared, her alleged killer was still breathing free air. On the very day Ashanti's body was found, April 16th, the Houston Police Department names Kevin Foe, the father of her unborn son, as the suspect. Capital murder. 2 counts, because under Texas law, Jackson counts. And Foe is gone. Vanished. A ghost with a $5,000 Crime Stoppers reward dangling over his head. Ashanti's family stands before news cameras, eyes hollowed out, begging anyone to come forward. But they also ask a much harder question, one that hangs over this entire tragedy like smoke. How was this man free? How, with a rap sheet stretching back years, with assault charges on the very woman now dead, was he not in a cell? Court records later fill in his escape route. Foe didn't evaporate. He fled. He took a bus to Jefferson Parish, Louisiana, to meet a woman he'd been talking to online. someone he'd never met in person. He arrived at her door at 5 a.m. on April 12th, 2 days after Ashanti disappeared, strolling into a new state while Houston searched for the woman he allegedly left behind. He told this Louisiana woman he was tangled in a missing persons case back home. Then, according to her account to police, he told her not to look it up. She looked it up anyway. What she found terrified her. She began asking questions, and around that same time she noticed something chilling. Foe was using a debit card, Ashanti's debit card, in Louisiana, days after Ashanti went missing. He wasn't just running, he was funding his flight with a dead woman's money. An anonymous tip pinpoints his location. On April 20th, 10 days after Ashanti was last seen alive, U.S. Marshals move in. They take Kevin Foe into custody at an apartment in Gretna, Louisiana, without incident. He's booked, extradited, and soon sits in a Harris County jail cell facing capital murder charges. His defense attorney declines to comment. He stands presumed innocent. But the evidence pile, the FaceTime call, the text, the surveillance, the debit card, the cord, is a mountain. Now pause the tape, because this case stops being just a murder and starts being an autopsy of a system failure that is going to make you furious. Kevin Foe was not a man who slipped through a crack. He was a repeat violent offender the system had multiple chances to stop. A Houston victims advocate called him a textbook case of escalating danger. September 2025. Foe is jailed for 2 separate assaults against Ashanti Allen. Read that again. September. Same pregnancy. Same woman. Now dead. This wasn't an old ex-boyfriend from years ago. This was 7 months before her death. He is sentenced in February 2026 to 280 days, a stretch that should have kept him locked up until roughly July. Ashanti's due date. She would have given birth with her alleged killer behind bars. But the Harris County Sheriff's Office applies something called a 2-for-1 credit. It's a jail population management tool that, in practice, doubles the value of time already served, so that 280-day sentence, it gets slashed. He doesn't serve until July. He walks out of the courtroom a free man the same day the deal is signed. Less than 2 months later, Ashanti is dead. A local advocate spells it out bluntly. A felony assault charge pleaded down to a Class B misdemeanor. 280 days, but served less than half. A calculation that valued overcrowding over a pregnant woman's life. Ashanti's mother has said with a level of anguish I can't adequately convey that she never knew the full extent. She didn't know about the assaults. She didn't know about the 2019, 2021, 2025 pattern. If she had, Kevin Foe would never have been anywhere near her daughter. But the system kept that information locked in paperwork, while Ashanti stood directly in the crosshairs. Her father puts it without fancy words. If something feels wrong in a relationship, tell someone. Your mother, your father, a sibling. Because silence is the killer's accomplice. And he's right. There's a broader, gutting statistic from the Society for Maternal Fetal Medicine that you need to hear. Homicide is a leading cause of death for pregnant and postpartum women in the United States. Not car wrecks, not medical complications. Violence. Ashanti's case isn't an anomaly. She's a data point in an epidemic, and the plea deal that freed her alleged killer is the smoking gun. Kevin Foe sits in the Harris County Jail, charged with capital murder for the deaths of Ashanti Allen and baby Jackson. Prosecutors have moved to deny bail under Texas's Proposition 3, which allows judges to slam the door on bail for certain violent offences. He is presumed innocent, a bedrock principle that protects everyone, even those we despise. But the evidence laid out in charging documents is relentless. The surveillance, the FaceTime confession, the phone data dancing in sync with his movements, the debit card, and the cord around her neck. A picture so damning prosecutors call it overwhelming. But what can't be undone is the 280 days that shrank to a handful. The courtroom math that placed a violent man back into the life of a woman he'd already been accused of attacking 2 months before she died. And the little boy named Jackson, who never got to take a single breath. Ashanti's family now funnels grief into a warning. Her mother speaks about safety planning, about the signs of lethal danger that whisper before they scream, about the need for the people around pregnant women to stay close, ask hard questions, and believe what they hear. Her father repeats the same mantra to every camera that will hold his gaze. If you see something, say something. Not to the wind, but to someone who can act. Ashanti Allen was 23 years old, 8 months into a high-risk pregnancy, days from meeting a son she'd already named. She had a car seat to buy, a stroller to pick out, a whole life waiting on the other side of a due date she never reached. Instead, her name is now a hashtag on a capital murder case and a mirror held up to a system that sees a woman's police report and too often answers with a plea deal. The warning signs were there, documented, dated, filed in cabinets and court records while Ashanti nested for a baby she'd never bring home. A family is left screaming a question that shouldn't need to be asked twice. Why do we keep letting this happen? The case of Ashanti Allen and her son Jackson isn't closed. The trial is pending, and we will follow every gavel strike. Hit subscribe, ring the bell. I'll have an update the moment the courtroom doors swing open. Now I want you to speak. Drop a comment and don't hold back. Should the 2-for-1 credit that slashed Kevin Foe's sentence be abolished in cases involving domestic violence? Should judges have the power to override it when repeat offenders stare them in the face? Let's light up the comments. I read them all, and your voice might just be the one that stops the next tragedy before it starts. Like this video to carve Ashanti and Jackson's names into the record. Subscribe to stand with us for the next case. And as always, stay safe out there. This has been Crime Autopsy.